BeTheTalk, episode 270, featuring organizer Lindsay Spencer-Matthews. Welcome to BeTheTalk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. And we are live again with Lindsay Spencer-Matthews. Lindsay, are you ready to talk?
Always ready to talk to you, Nathan.
Okay, this is a bonus session because we were in the Blitz round, and Lindsay has his speaker hat on, and he said something about having been an organizer. And if you've listened and subscribed to Be the Talk, you know that I love talking to organizers, whether they've organized in the past, whether they're currently organizing, when they're preparing to organize. Now, Lindsay has done this in the past, and as both of us can attest to, I've never been a primary organizer before, but I've seen enough behind the scenes to really appreciate, oh my gosh, all of the work that goes into this behind the scenes. You got to build a team. You got to find great speakers. You got to get sponsors to pay for the event. Then you got to sell tickets to the public and fill up the arena, and wherever size arena that might be. Lindsay, what am I leaving out here? There are all kinds of things I'm leaving out.
You're right, Nathan, but you've accurately identified the three big hotspots. The finding a team, finding speakers, and finding sponsors are the three big deals. However, the least of those, the one that provided us the least problem was finding speakers. We put out a call and we were inundated. Mm-hmm. So rather than finding speakers, the biggest challenge is selecting speakers. Determining by CV, by interview, by track record, and by topic, which people were likely to grasp the nettle on the day and really augment the event. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how enthusiastic or generous your sponsors are. It doesn't matter how brilliantly you've set up the room. It doesn't matter how fabulous your team has organised the day. What matters is what the speakers do in their 18 minutes in front of on the stage. So the other thing that I think is worthwhile is the phenomenal legacy of doing such an event. We had a relatively short day. We only had 9 speakers.
That's a full day. I mean, there are some that are bigger than that. I mean, 9 speakers is 9 speakers.
Yes. The event that I spoke at, there were 12 speakers, so It was a huge day. But the 9 speakers we got were all uniformly really good and interesting. And we had a couple that were absolutely out of the box, spectacularly wonderful. And one, even though I'm a hardened old cynic, one even made me cry. And laugh at the same talk. So it was it really had all of the best elements that you could hope for in a TED talk. And I'd love to give her a plug. I've got nothing to gain from it, but is that okay, Nathan?
Oh, please. Where can we go to ride this emotional roller coaster with you?
This lady, she's a professional comedian and a clown doctor, and her name's Jenny Winters.
A clown doctor?
Oh, you don't have that phenomenon where you are.
No, we have clown horror slasher psycho killers that dress up as clowns. But is this a doctor that clowns around? Is this a clown that helps? Is like a jester to doctor? What is a clown doctor?
A clown doctor in Australia is, and there's many of them. It's a rigorous process they have to go through. And their objective is to lighten the burden of seriously ill children.
Okay.
And it's just inspirational what they do. They do it for no money, and they get all the regalia on, and they bring all of their comedic and funny tricks and things to a hospital room. And their objective is to make a very, very ill and potentially miserable child a little happier for a few moments. And there's all sorts of medical and psychological evidence to demonstrate the value in this. I'm just awed and inspired by these people. So Jenny's talk had 2 elements. One was her talk is about abandoning the brace position. And she argues that every time you take an aeroplane flight, they tell you what to do in case of an accident, that you fold your arms against the seat ahead of you and you put your head down. And she said, what is the point if you're dropping out of the sky from 30,000 feet? That's number one. And the second is, not that many aeroplanes fall out of the sky. And so why would you prepare yourself for disaster when most of the flight is going to be a joyful experience? And she exquisitely told the journey of her grandmother's demise, which her mother, I don't want to give too much away, but her mother died very young, and so she had a subconscious expectation that the people that she loved would die. And so she and her sister spent 30 years with no evidence waiting for their grandmother to die, because their grandmother took them over. And she told this exquisitely beautiful story of how it wasn't until their grandmother fell terribly ill and was dying that they realised that they could release themselves of the burden of expectation of disaster and just embrace the journey. And she exquisitely and poignantly expressed her regret that they hadn't done that for 30 years, that they only did it for the whatever it was, 30 days or so that it took their beloved grandmother to pass away. And then she top-ended it with some equally poignant, beautiful stories from her experiences as a clown doctor.
So you're organizing an event, Lindsay, and then you have a very heightened emotional talk like that. Where do you put someone? Do you put her in the beginning? Do you put her at the end? Do you put her in the middle? How did you curate that?
We put it at the end. We wanted to end the day with a bang. The moment we met this lady, we knew she was likely to be gold. We knew we had a strong lineup of speakers, so our belief was that we weren't going to need a kickstart in the middle. You know how people sometimes flag in the middle or the afternoon. So we started with a very, very strong speaker. We then had a list of equally strong people, and then we finished with Jenny, and we were just so glad we did.
And now, it always fascinates me. Did you take on the role of the MC? Did you have an MC in there? Who did you bring in to kind of manage the energy level of the room and introduce the next speaker, or did you do something entirely different?
No, I was the MC, Nathan. So, I appear on none of the TED Talks. So
in between them,
in between, and I love the role, being able to. After every speaker, we had a very quick Q&A, and they were Dorothy Dix Q&As. It was me asking spontaneous questions of the speaker. So there was a tiny bit of pressure on me to be able to do the sort of job that you do, but do it in front of the live audience to kind of augment the experience for the audience. That was how we went with me as the MC.
So how did you get involved and work your way into a position of organizer? You got a busy practice. You've got plenty of other things to be doing. And then you came back and gave your own talk afterwards. So can you just briefly give me a little bit of a timeline? Take me back to when you first heard about TED and how you applied for license, or maybe perhaps some people take it over from other established licensees. There are all kinds of different ways that people get involved. So I'd love to hear your story.
Well, Sarah, my wife, and I, we've been avid consumers of TED Talks for 20 years. And so, I've listened to and watched at least hundreds of TED Talks. And we live in a kind of a bit of a troubled regional city. We live in the city of Ipswich in Queensland, and it has an interesting blue-collar history where the two main industries in Ipswich had actually died out. Coal mining and train building were the mainstays of Ipswich's growth historically. And so we live in this wonderful emerging regional city. It is growing, but it still has some challenges. And we decided that we wanted to give the gift of TEDx wisdom to Ipswich. And so we approached the local council, and they were pretty enthusiastic. And so it was relatively easy to segue in. Sarah applied for the license, and the TED organisation gave it to us. They also gave us the e-manual, which, if it was printed out, would be about that thick. Of all of the rules and limitations.
Got to be done within those parameters.
Yes, and I respect their right. They've got an incredible international brand, and I think they've got every right to protect it. But it makes it relatively limiting and restricting as an organizer. But that's okay. We were happy to follow all of those limitations. And then the next challenge was to try and get the money. I mean, even our little regional TED Talk still was close to $40,000 to produce for the day.
Wow.
And we didn't cut any corners. We had really good catering. We had professional AV. It was a big deal. We had a beautiful, intimate little venue, and it's an innovation hub in Ipswich. We had. I often say, I'm reflecting on it, that we had hopes that were that high. And we had expectations that were that high, and we had an outcome that was that high.
Nice.
At the end of the day, we were exhausted, but we were just blown away. We did. I believe that we and our speakers and our team produced an outcome that was world class. It was just wonderful how it all came together at the end.
And so I'm curious, I mean, what a happy ending to the story. What was the impact, and what was the response of the community and maybe the powers that be in the community as you were preparing for it? Did they really rally around it, even though it was the first one? What was the impact coming out of it? Did it really highlight in the way that you wanted your city and benefit the city overall?
Great question, Nathan, and I haven't actually formulated any sort of a response to that, so I just have to think for a moment.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that should we ever do such a thing again, and it's unlikely that we will, but should we ever do such a thing again, one of the things that we would need to put in place proactively would be managing the post-event promotion of the speakers and getting the sponsors to be more proactive in promoting the speakers, getting the sponsors to take more ownership and pride of their involvement with it. It was an inaugural event that had never happened in our city before. Our local city council has chased us very hard for over a year to try and get us to do it again. But we were absolutely we were shattered by.
Well, it's a balancing act or an unbalancing act. And Talk Universe, you may or may not know this by now. You know, organizers are volunteers, and so they're leading other volunteers, and nobody gets paid for doing this. So these amazing events that you see, and these amazing stages and the amazing AV and the amazing caterers, the vendors get paid because they need to be paid because it needs to be recorded well, it needs to be edited well. But the organizers do not receive any compensation other than, you know, just goodwill and giving back to the community. And, you know, that's part of the reason I'm asking the questions. I know some of the questions to ask, and it can be, you know, if you have that desire and the bandwidth and perhaps are a little bit independently wealthy, it can be a nice little side hobby for many, many people. But, you know, it is a challenge to do that and then balance your everyday life and be leading, not managing volunteers. You have to lead volunteers who also have busy lives and give very generously and liberally of their time and energy.
Can I make a comment regarding volunteers, Nathan?
Please.
Sure. The single biggest challenge we had was getting a team of volunteers. We had no shortage of people wanting to be involved. And one of the things the TED manual recommends is that you give every volunteer a small task to do that's not vital or important, and you then ignore them. And you give them a time period. You say, okay, Mary Smith, you want to be a volunteer, great. What we need to happen is we need someone to get prices on printing the booklets, and we've got to have this done within a week. Now, you're happy to do that, Mary? At the volunteer meeting, Mary says, I know a printer. My brother-in-law's a printer. Yes, I'll do that. And you then say, thanks, Mary. Here's all the details. We'll talk to you in a week. And then in a week, you go to the printers and I mean, what you want is for Mary to come back in 5 days and say, here's all the work I've done. I've got 4 prices. I'll get and that's kind of fairyland. It doesn't happen that way.
Well, and that's when you know you have a keeper, when they actually take the initiative on the front end and then they come right back around on the back end. You ask me how I know. I've led boards of directors of volunteer organizations, and that is really good advice. That is so much better than, hey, somebody comes up, I want to be on the board, give me a board, and that is not a good thing at all. That's a great way to funnel people and let them, merit based, gain more and more authority and responsibility.
Yeah, because your only alternative is to be a micromanager, and then you may as well do the work yourself. And that's heartbreaking and exhausting. The other interesting phenomenon about organisers is that on the day, as we were putting the venue together, it's a relatively public venue. As we were putting it together, we had people associated with the venue sort of happenstance stumbling across it and saying, oh, what's this? Oh, TED Talks. Oh, can we help? So on the day, we had more ushers than we could deal with.
Oh, nice.
But you cannot organise an event of that magnitude on the serendipitous outcome of finding ushers on the day. So,
the name I briefly caught, it was TEDx Wisdom. Is that what? No, that was.
No, it was TEDx Ipswich.
Ipswich. Okay. You were talking about the wisdom of TEDx in Ipswich, your city. Correct. Right there. Yep. So we've been enjoying Lindsay Spencer-Matthews. This is a special organizer bonus session, and Lindsay is not currently an active organizer, and he swears that he's never going to be again. However, it was a great experience. If you've ever led teams of volunteers, if you've ever done something like, you might understand a little bit of how you can be completely open-hearted, completely grateful for a wonderful experience, and not go back into the ring again. And that's what it sounds like we have here, which is great. We're all learning. I really appreciate Lindsay being willing to be candid about all this. What's your final word of advice for people who, and a lot of people don't know they can apply to be organizers. So it's very, very possible. What's your final word of advice to that end?
If you are a TED devotee, if you love the concept, and if you want to give a gift to your community, then give it a go. But give yourself plenty of time, plenty of discipline, and treat it like a business. Even though you're not allowed to make any money out of it, treat it as though the family farm depended upon it, and then hopefully you'll get great outcomes.
Lindsay Spencer-Matthews, thank you again for this wonderful bonus session, sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe today.
Good on you, Nathan. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Be the Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.